The brain is a physical organ. I'm aware of at least two physicians in the room. This intimidates me, but I'll say it anyway. That physical organ can get sick. And the brain being sick, unfortunately, as the brain houses the mind, organic illness in the brain can set off difficulties in the mind that can lead to all manner of struggles. The tragedy of lost opportunity, the tragedy of broken relationships and weeping friends. But the unpardonable sin, not even close. Not even close. And again, I bet you knew that because you know your own capacity to sin if you're truthful about it. Not all bound up in self-righteousness, which, by the way, being all bound up in self-righteousness is on the road to the unpardonable sin. So watch that stuff. And pray for this dear family. And for a shoulder that needs rebuilding. Wow. Joseph has had a past. I come into the story. I join y'all. Let me see. Victimized by a father who played favorites. At the time, Joseph probably would have said, I'm not being victimized. I got it made. In this large, blended family, there were a lot of mamas in Joseph's family. In this large, blended family, I'm one of the youngest kiddos, but it's pretty clear to everybody who'll look, Daddy loves me most. What victimized? Well, of course, the ticking time bomb of his brother's resentment had been wound up. Joseph, apparently, in what is arguably the only instance of, look, Joseph was not sinless, not by a long shot, but the only, Joe, you're going to need to think about your actions here. Joe, you're messing this up, was his, snotty is not an objectionable word, right? I can use the word snotty with freedom. His snotty little attitude toward his brothers regarding his dream about all the constellations bowing down and all that stuff when he was a kid. Joe, you probably could have kept that one to yourself. But of course, like little brothers everywhere, he had to bring it out. So he's pitched down a well, sold into slavery. His death is faked to his parents. But he lands on his feet and ends up in a pretty good gig as the household manager of an Egyptian army officer. But then falsely accused of a sex crime. Let's call it what it is. If there was a sex offender database in Egypt, he just got on it for life. Because that's what it was. Sex crime he didn't commit, but he went to jail for it anyway. And again, he's dealing with a special victims unit, not just the regular CSIs, Law and order, special victims. He's in the deep stuff. So he goes to prison. But once again, he ends up just as he was to Potiphar. He ends up being the guy you go to. The prison keeper's problem solver. Back when I was an exec pastor, I used to say Joseph was the patron. I know we Protestants don't have patron saints, but Joseph is the patron saint of exec pastors because he never actually ran anything, just did all the work. Because he was the number 2 guy in the Potiphar's house, number 2 guy in the prison. He hears about the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker. And he says to the 2 of them, I suppose I've got good news and bad news. Both of you are going to get your heads lifted up, but only one of you should be excited about it. Cupbearer, you're going to be restored to your previous position. And by the way, once you are, put in a word. Baker, you're going to get your head lifted up as well, but like all the way up and off. Sorry, but you asked. Then the Pharaoh, the king, has the corn and cows dreams. That's how I remembered it from childhood VBS. They both start with C. Nice of God to alliterate those for me. 7 skinny cows devour the 7 healthy cows. The 7 rotten ears of corn devour 7 healthy ears of corn. And in both cases, after the devouring, there's no sign. The 7 skinny cows eat the 7 healthy cows without getting any healthier. The spindly, rotten ears of corn absorb the healthy ears of corn without getting healthy themselves. Cupbearer says, dreams, 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 dreams. Where have I? Doink! Pharaoh, you got a guy in prison. Since all your resident experts are stumped, you got a guy in prison that I knew a couple of years back I was supposed to say something. But the guy's good with dreams. Put in a little rabbit-chasing footnote here, and I imagine this was covered by an earlier teacher in the series. Daniel and Joseph are the 2 instances in the Old Testament where prophetic interpretation of dreams absolutely happened. That's 2 guys in a span of time from creation to about 400 BC. The odds greatly favor you not having dream experiences that you can understand what God is saying, particularly in the New Testament era when God has spoken to us by His completed Word. So if you have weird dreams about corn and cows, I would say don't eat a big steak right before you go to bed. And corn is hard to digest. That might be what's keeping you awake. But we know that Joseph's capacity to interpret was a gift from God. Pharaoh calls him up. Moses lays out the interpretation. You've got 7 years coming that are going to be great beyond belief. It's going to be high times in Egypt. Store some of it. Put it away. Because right on the heels of those 7 years, and by the way, they're coming soon, you're going to have 7 years of nothing. Great scarcity. God has given you by His grace the ability to see it coming. But you really need to start arranging some things. And it would be wise of you to find somebody wise. I don't think Joseph was doing a job interview. I think Joseph was glad to be out of prison, even for a day, But I don't think Joseph wanted the job. I think Pharaoh surprised him. Now, I'm interpolating that because we don't have anything in the text about Joseph's emotional response to Pharaoh's response. But Joseph is humble, and I don't think he was suggesting himself. But I think Pharaoh said, I've got a room full of advisors, none of whom could tell me one thing. And you've come in here and you've given me the right information, you've given me the right plan going forward. I'm going to be happiest if you run it. So congratulations. And there we join, where we join tonight. We are in verse 41 of chapter 41. So we're in 41:41. Genesis. Genesis 41:41. Yes, sir.
How did Pharaoh know that was the right answer?
That is a fantastic question. And I have no idea. Other than perhaps God the Holy Spirit, who communicates as He will, may have thumped Pharaoh on the ear and said, listen, But he does seem to have an extraordinary openness. Maybe as he knew the track record. Daniel got it right with the cupbearer. He got it right with the baker. Joseph's answer was not tentative. So.
Yeah.
Isn't it very similar with Daniel in the Babylon King?
Yeah. In both cases, it's like these ultra powerful, most powerful person in the world in their time, hear this humble outlier man of God say, this is what God is trying to tell you, you better listen. So
They trusted him.
Yeah. So, I don't know. That's a great question. So here's the deal. The Apostle Paul in Philippians 4, and I'm not kidding. Keep your thumb in Genesis 41. My favorite example, when I want to explain the importance of context, my favorite example of a verse that gets yanked out of its context and walked around on all fours like a dog on a leash is Philippians 4:19. Philippians 4:19 is evoked as though God is promising the Christian practical omnipotence. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So, if I have to pass a test I didn't study for, no problem, I can do all things. If I have to nail that job interview that I'm not qualified for, no problem, I can do all things. Philippians 4:19, I can do all things. 4:13, this is what happens. I can do all things through quadrifocals and flickering fluorescent lights. 4:13, I can do all things. Now, it is certainly the case that God empowers his people. But to evoke Philippians 4:13 as some sort of promise of omnicapability will leave you disappointed regarding what you thought God promised you. Because that sentence, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, or through him who strengthens me, is the last sentence of a paragraph. And that paragraph is about something. That paragraph is about remaining faithful no matter what your money circumstances are. If I have to manage not having enough money, I can do that because of Jesus. If I have to manage an abundance and still honor Christ and not get distracted and derailed, I can do that too. Because I can do all things through Christ. Now, I don't know about you, that promise to me is useful. That promise is applicable. That promise interacts with the $7 I have in my pocket this evening, or the times when I don't have $7 in my pocket, which is where we live. The promise that I can do anything through Christ who strengthens me doesn't do me any good if I blow out a tire on I-75 on the way home tonight. I still got to get out and change that tire. I can't. And if I didn't stow my jack right last time and I don't have my jack, and I'm thinking to myself, this would be so much easier if I could change the tire with one hand while holding the car up with the other, and I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Why can't I do that? Christ has failed me. And I've seen Christians deal with bitterness over what they perceive to be a Philippians 4:13 failure that really is their failure to understand Philippians 4:13. But in that paragraph, Paul makes the enigmatic statement. We can get right in sync with someone who says, because of Christ, I have the strength to get through a season in my life where there really doesn't seem to be much money. Okay. Most people I know can relate to that. The unexpected expense, the roof fails at the worst possible time, The college bills are coming in, the stuff. But Paul turns that coin over and says, not only that, I know how to stay in right fellowship with the Lord when I've got an abundance. I have a friend who's an attorney. And he said that during the course of his practice, he has represented and worked with 3 different big dollar lottery winners. And he says he told me, he didn't tell me their names, didn't tell me the year, didn't tell me a thing of identifying detail. But he said in all 3 cases it destroyed them. Destroyed their families, destroyed they would have been better off to have never won. Because they didn't know how to manage abundance. What does that have to do with our story tonight? Joseph, youngest kid. Joseph, slave. Joseph, prisoner. Suddenly, instantly, becomes Joseph, prime minister of the world's great superpower in his day. Gotta tell you, I expect it to crack him up. If I'm reading the story for the first time, I'm going, oh boy, this is going to get ugly. Because people can't handle that sort of sudden skyrocket rise. So my title tonight, I finally get to it at 5 till 7. That's not unusual, is it, my brother, my sisters? Joseph faces 2 great tests. I'll call them prosperity and power. Prosperity because suddenly, bam, he's prime minister of Egypt. Pretty cushy gig. And power because as we round into the first part of chapter 42, which we will do, he's got his brothers by the throat and they don't know it. That same despicable lot that threw him down a hole, sold him into slavery, and faked his death. And he's got them. You talk about a test. All right, Roman number 1, prosperity. Letter A, if you like outlining, his status, verses 41 through 45. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took his signet ring. That is, the word signet in Hebrew is literally the word to press. So it literally was, you know what a signet ring was used for, right? It was to press your seal. Signet, from which our English word signature comes down. It's the idea of the massive authority. He's being given the signing power of the king. Gave him his signet. It's not just here, wear this nice ring. There is a huge conferring of authority. And put it on Joseph's hand and clothed him in garments of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck. And he made him ride in his 2nd chariot, and they called out before him, bow the knee. Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh. I am Pharaoh. I'm the king. And without your consent, no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zephanath-Paneah, which is a couple of different root words there, but they refer to powerful Egyptian gods. Basically, it is associating Joseph with the divine hierarchy of Egypt. And gave him in marriage to Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Married him into another royal family. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. Now, wow, a get out of jail free card would have been nice. You know, I've been sitting in your prison. I think Swindoll says he was about 17 when his family collapsed and he went into slavery. He's about 30 now. So give or take 13 years of confinement and zero status living is suddenly shot to the top. And you and I both know there's lots of opportunity to handle that really, really badly. But letter B, his service. I love the wording in verse 46. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. If that sentence was all we had, we'd think, yeah, what's he doing? Picking camel toes, out of dirt out of the toes of all the Pharaoh's flocks and livestock? What's he doing? Is he washing dishes in the bottom level sink, the bottom level kitchen? He's out of prison, and now he's in the service of Pharaoh. If we just had that, we would think, well, yay that he's out of prison. But I bet he's doing the scut work. I bet he's cleaning floors or, I just love, we've just had this paragraph that he's been given pretty much everything that's not critically unique to Pharaoh-ness has been carved off Pharaoh and put on him. Privilege, power. You gotta figure if he got that name, he got that wife, the housing must have been off the hook. He got the house on the hill. Are there hills in Egypt? I don't know. If there are hills in Egypt, he got the house on the hill. And yet, Moses, writing Genesis with the mind of the Holy Spirit to guide his pen, phrases it, he entered service. I think he entered service not because of what was externally around him, but because of what was internal within him. A sort of a matter-of-fact godly humility. And he did the job. Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. And during the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly. And he gathered up all the food of these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt, and he put the food in the cities. And he put in every city the food from the fields around it. So he already had thought ahead to logistics and distribution in addition to just harvesting and gathering. Extraordinarily methodical. And Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. How much do we have? Enough. Enough. So much so that we've overwhelmed whatever little inventory system we had. We're ready. Better see. This is that favorite moment I told you about. His sons. His sons. And if I have a primary application point for us tonight, here it comes. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore them to him. There's an implication there, by the way. I'll put in another footnote. The author of Genesis is pointing out Joseph's monogamy in what was probably a polygamous culture. Joseph had grown up in a home that was fractured by multiple mommies and this whole tapestry of kids from different moms. Here, these sons are born the year before the famine. So 6 years after he married his wife, she's still his only wife. Nobody else is mentioned. And only by her does he have children. In a culture where normal would have been a string of wives and who knows how many things going on the side. So there's another little reminder of Joseph's faithfulness to the glory of God. But oh, what he named those boys. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Forgetful, because that's what Manasseh means. Forgetful. Forgetful. And he named the second Fruitful. Because that's what Ephraim means. Forgetful and fruitful. You got junk in your past. No two of us have the same junk. No two of us have exactly the same sort of junk. But everybody in this room, and we're all adults, every one of us have a past. And every one of us has junk and clutter back there. And I'm not accusing you of anything other than having spent some years on planet Earth. And if you've spent some years on planet Earth, you've got a past, and in that past there's some junk and clutter. Now think about Joseph's. Your junk and clutter might be a little dramatic. I don't know. But think about Joseph's. Sold into literal slavery by his siblings. Maybe that hasn't happened to you. Having his death faked to his father. Maybe that hasn't happened to you. Falsely accused of a grievous crime for which he spends more than a decade in jail, that crime being a crime of a sexual nature. And if you think the stigma for that was any less back then than it is today, you just underestimate the human condition. So falsely accused of a rape, thrown in prison for 10 years, on top of the other stuff. Joseph would have been normal to define the rest of his life in terms of that victimhood. Nobody would bat an eye if he went on into his life saying, I am the way I am because I grew up in a dysfunctional family with siblings who hated me. I am who I am because as a young man I was accused of a terrible crime I did not commit. I was on the inside for 10 years as an innocent person, and that messed me up. Joseph could have lived the rest of his life remembering. He chose to forget. When a guy with a story like Joseph names his firstborn son forgetful, he's making a statement. I've known a lot of believers in seasons of my life. I've been one of them, where I have kept and treasured painful memories. Now look, I'm not talking about having, surgery to have them cut out. But you and I both have brains that work like, among their various other characteristics, film archives. And you and I can bring our victimhood to the front and view it often and reinforce our victim status. Or, by the grace of God, maybe not literally forgetting, but we can tuck that, and I'm not talking about repressing. Don't go all psychoanalyst on me. But I am talking about putting it in the back of the cabinet and moving forward. Amen. And saying, you know what? That happened to me, and it did. But I do not have to live in 2021 in the shadow of something that happened in 1997. I just don't. And you say, well, it's not that easy. Maybe not, but it is that simple. It seems to me that Joseph, by an act of his own resolve, grounded in a deep love for his Lord, said, I'm going to be forgetful. I am not going to live my life as the former con. I am not going to live my life as the falsely accused. I am not going to live my life as the former slave. I am not going to live my life as the victim of a dysfunctional upbringing. I'm going to live my life forgetful with reference to that stuff. By the way, I think right here we kind of see what's coming. I think that's the author of Genesis is foreshadowing most of what's to come. Because again, in 42, he's about to have his brothers. And they don't even know he's got them. Because they don't recognize him, remember? Forgetful. Once you get forgetful, you may as well get fruitful. You may as well say, Lord, my life to this point hasn't necessarily produced a lot of impact for the benefit of others. That, broadly speaking, with some exception, but broadly speaking, with some exception, when the Bible talks about fruitfulness, it's talking about your kingdom impact in the lives of other people. Orange trees don't eat oranges. The orange tree does not generate oranges for its own benefit. It generates oranges for the benefit of others. Your spiritual fruit is not mostly for your benefit. Your spiritual fruit is so passers-by can be blessed by something they pick off your tree. Having named son number 1 forgetful, he named son number 2 fruitful. And I absolutely love that. I want to high five him when I meet him in heaven and go, man, whatever brought you to that moment, you and I together, praise God for that moment. Because he could have named his kids bitterness and vengeance. And nobody would have batted an eye. He could have named them, I'm going to get them back good. And had that put on the t-shirt, you know. And I'm not making light of anybody's victimhood. I truly am not. But we can't make light of what the Word of God is trying to teach us here. You know? And I have known so many and have spent moments in this same cell that are locked up in a cell constructed of their own mismanaged memories. Their own, not a cell of their experiences in the past, but a cell created by their handling of their experiences in the past. Their constant cultivation of self-perceived victimhood. For the child of God, whatever you are not mostly a victim. And again, I started this conversation by saying you've got some stuff in your past that's baggagey, and I get that, me too. Forgetful and fruitful, please. If you remember anything from tonight, remember that forgetful and fruitful are available to you. If they were available to Joseph, they're available to you. Well, I can't just forget what happened to me. In the quietness of your own quiet time, you put your experiences down on a piece of paper that you can burn or shred. You put your experience down that you say you can't forget, that you can't get over. And you put Joseph's experience beside it. And ask yourself, would you trade with Joseph? Because Joseph lived going forward in forgetfulness. And I know I'm belaboring this point, but I really think for tonight it's the central point of application for this passage. But there's still more to go. So we have not only his status and his service and his sons, but then we hear about his storehouses in the last paragraph of chapter 41. For 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt, or the 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end. And 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. There was famine in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. Remember, around each city, he had said, store the surplus there locally so you've got access to it. So we won't haul it all to some big center and then have to haul it all back out. So the whole land had food. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph, and what he says to you do. So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. Fascinating to me that he didn't give it away. Maybe massive government giveaways in the face of need aren't the best approach. But I digress. I love Wednesday night. For the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt, to Joseph, to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. I suppose I could make an applicational point about world-changing impact and all that sort of stuff. But I believe there's a more relevant application point to be made here of a man who simply followed the course of life that the living God ordained for him to follow. Stood in faithfulness and integrity with a heavy side of forgetfulness of past harms and hurts. He simply got up every day and did God's will for him that day. And ended up being pretty inarguably at this moment the most strategic person on the face of the earth. Known civilization around Egypt can eat because Joseph did what God made him to do. I don't think Joseph was out there on the lecture circuit talking about how to have worldwide impact. I don't think he was selling books. It seems inconsistent with me with his character. I think he was just doing what God wanted him to do. And one day maybe some friend or his sweet wife or one of his boys said, Dad, you do know the whole world would be up the creek if you hadn't gotten this right. Prosperity is a tough test. I'm convinced, and I confess to y'all, my friends, I've not experienced real poverty. You know, Gail and I have the stories of the seminary student apartment that cost us a whopping $200 a month, and the apartment full of furniture that all together probably cost us another $200. Driving cars that were 20 years old, going to the dollar movie, checking the balance on the ATM, this is pre-internet, checking the balance on the ATM to see if there was enough float that we could take out $10 and go to Taco Bell. But on a world scale, that's not poverty. That's not living that way in downtown Memphis while I went to seminary. That's not poverty. I've never known poverty. And I've never known what our culture would call great affluence. But I got a car that runs and has air conditioning. I got a TV set that would make a mad scientist blush not that many years ago. I got more computing power in my upstairs study than the space shuttle had. I think prosperity may be the harder test. I think prosperity may be, it was Jesus who said that wealthy people getting into heaven is like threading a needle by walking a camel through the eye, to which the people who were listening said, well, you do know that's impossible. I'm paraphrasing. And Jesus said, exactly it is. Don't kid yourself. All salvation is impossible, apart from the grace of God. But Jesus never talked about the particular difficulty of poor people coming into heaven. He talked a lot about the particular difficulty for rich people. And I just think Joseph nailed it. I think Joseph nailed it. Prosperity. And then, Romans 2, power. You say, wait a minute, Brother Russell, he already had power. He's the prime minister of Egypt. Oh, yeah, he did. He did. But this is some next level crazy power. he's about to have, because those jerk brothers of him that threw him down a hole, those jerk brothers of him that wrecked his adolescence, those jerk brothers of him whose malfeasance put into play his 13 years of suffering, need food. And the only guy in the world that's got food is little Joey. How I would salivate over this moment with some people from my own story who have treated me badly. Ooh, I would file my teeth on this moment. There's something deeply satisfying about the now I've got you moment. And I don't mean to sound quite completely unsanctified, but I don't want us to miss the remarkableness of Joseph's opportunity here. And since he's not Jesus, the temptation that must have been going on in the background hum of this moment. Letter A, his siblings, verses 1 through 5. When Jacob, the camera angle now swoops back up to the land of Israel. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do y'all look at one another? Why are you idiots sitting around in a circle?" Anyway, seems like he's still a little bit dysfunctional with the boys. "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, that is Joseph's only full biological brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Seems like the whole favoritism thing just shifted down a notch when Joseph was no longer on the scene. "I'm going to send you 10 hooligans to get the food, but I'm keeping the kid I like, so if anything bad happens, I've still got him." Thus the sons of Israel, the sons of Jacob, came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Letter B, his situation. Now Joseph was governor over the land, in case you forgot. He was the one who sold all the people of the land, in case you forgot. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground, just like the snotty little dream. Told you so. I told you this moment would come, and here we are. I know it says in a moment, it says he spoke roughly to them. I think he's acting. The guy who named his kid Forgetful is not a guy who's circling around toward vengeance. And maybe, I think he probably formulated his plan over a few days. That's why he incarcerated the brothers and then let them go so quickly. We'll see that in a minute. But if it was in Joseph, if Joseph the man was still that little snot, this is the moment. Well, look at y'all bowing down to me. Let me see if I can remember how to sound like a Hebrew and say that in an accent you might recognize, instead of speaking Egyptian, as I have for these years when I've been kind of running this nation. This is a high drama moment. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them. And he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And that's not that hard. Change of attire, passing of years. Swindoll says a clean-shaven face, because most of the Egyptian men shaved, based on what we know of imagery and things from that time and place. Most of the Hebrew men did not. So he's more than a decade older. He's shaved his face. He's speaking aristocratic Egyptian, not street Hebrew. They don't know who it is. One commentator I read talked about God the Spirit suppressed their recognition of him. Maybe. The text doesn't say that. I don't think it takes that. I can see people I've not seen in 5 years and have no idea who they are. Now I'm, feeble-brained, but I don't think there's specifically anything supernatural going on here. He recognized them because there's a lot of them, and they're coming as a group, and they're wearing Hebrew clothes and speaking Hebrew, and Joseph hadn't forgotten where he grew up. At any rate, Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. Ooh. And so he lowered the boom, and the next sight was their heads bouncing down a hill in a perfect little single file line. Right? I mean, that's what we expect. He said to them, "You're spies, and you've come to see the nakedness of the land. You Raggedy 10 Jews are here to plan the invasion of Egypt." That's preposterous. That's completely preposterous, but there's nobody around. Pharaoh's not in the room, so there's nobody who can call him. He makes this preposterous accusation, which he's going to repeat. Maybe this prefigures the Canaanite spies a few centuries later. Maybe. I don't know. But on the face of it, it's absurd. They said to him, No, my Lord, your servants have come to buy food. We're all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies. All right. I've never been a law enforcement officer. I have absolutely no law enforcement training, but I like cop shows on TV, which means nothing. But because I like cop shows on TV and true crime documentaries and books and stuff, I have learned about means, motive, and opportunity. And if you're a real law enforcement officer and I'm getting that absolutely wrong, your beef is not with me, it's with the entire television and film industry. Because that is all I've heard all my life, is that's what you're looking for when you're trying to corner a suspect and know who done it. Find somebody who could have done it. That's means. Find somebody who would have wanted to do it. That's motive. Find somebody who had a chance to do it. That's opportunity. And if they got all three, they're the odds-on favorite to have done something really, really bad. Joseph, have you got the means? Well, let me see. One man alive, the Pharaoh, can countermand your orders. And you got all the tools of nastiness that the Egyptians can come up with at your disposal. Yeah, you got the means. Have you got the motive? Oh, I don't know. Wrecked my life entirely. Yeah. Opportunity? There's never been a better opportunity. That's the situation. But let her see his strategy. His strategy. Joseph lives his life. Joseph lives his life wanting to be used redemptively by God. Remember, not only forgetful, but also fruitful. I want my life to have kingdom impact in the lives of others. I want to be fruitful. You can't be fruitful and vengeful at the same time. That won't work. And he's got to navigate some stuff, and you could argue how elegantly he navigates the next chunks of narrative. But let's look at it and see if Joseph is used of God in a way that is fruitful. His strategy. He said to them, I'm in verse 12, no, it is the nakedness. And by that, he means vulnerability. He's not making a comment about Egyptian wardrobe here. He's talking about the exposure and vulnerability of the land in a strategic way. No, you're here to see the vulnerability of the land. And they said, we, your servants, are 12 brothers, sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. Want to bet? Want to bet? Joseph said to them, it is as I said to you, you are spies. By the way, when they said the youngest is this day with our father, what two pieces of information did they just give Joseph that Joseph would have been absolutely thrilled to now know to be true? Those two are both still alive. You know, some years have passed, and it's a mean world. And I wonder if you had a hidden camera on Joseph's face. I wonder if he twitched at that moment. I wonder how good his poker face really was when he heard them say that, and he thought, my brother and my dad are both still alive. And I think from that time on, what he starts plotting is how can he be fruitful in all of their lives in ways they don't expect. Doesn't necessarily know how he's going to do it, but I think his intentionality to bless the entire family kicks in hard in that moment. By this you shall be tested, by the life of Pharaoh. That is, I ain't kidding. You shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. And wouldn't I love to have the audio and video of those 3 days? We get a little summary here in a moment as the oldest brother, Reuben, goes into full out I told you so mode. Because as you recall, Reuben put up a token effort back at the beginning to not fake Joseph's death and throw him down a well and sell him into slavery. Wasn't a very strong effort, but Reuben feels like he can at least carve out a little bit of moral high ground, as we'll see in a moment. But for 3 days, the guys cooled it in a Roman dungeon. I wonder if it was on the same corridor as Joseph's cell. I don't know. Interesting. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God." Now, a God-fearer is a Gentile who is aware of the God of Israel, but who has not converted to fully worshiping the God of Israel. It's not a convert to Judaism. It's an observer, a respectful observer of Judaism. So Joseph tips his hand a little bit. If you are honest men, let's, instead of holding all of you and sending one, I'm going to hold one of you and send the rest. Let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody. Let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households. Because if I send just one, there's not enough cargo capacity, Joseph is thinking, to bless Jacob's household. If I let just one go, I can't send him loaded down with blessing for the family. If I hold just one, I can load down the caravan. Intentional. Fruitfulness. Desire to be used of God for the spiritual benefit of others. Bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. And then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul, and he begged us, and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. No, dude. No, dude. First, you're not in distress. You're on ground zero of incredible grace. You just don't know it yet. This isn't distress. That dead, missing brother is being used of God to choreograph this stuff, and you're not in distress. You're the objects of grace. It's going to unfold over time. And this mechanical view of cause and effect, I did something wrong, therefore that's why I'm having a really rough day. Look, God chastises those He loves. You and I both know that. But if you start looking for mechanical cause and effect, I was mean to my neighbor and that's why my cat died. Well, unless your neighbor you were mean to poisoned your cat. But you can't trace. Job's friends made that mistake and prattled on for more than 30 chapters about the cause and effect relationship. This bad stuff would not have happened to you if you hadn't done something really terrible. And when God shows up, God calls them darkening counsel by words without knowledge. All bad stuff in the world arises from sin in the general sense. We live in a broken world because of sin. But if your knee hurts tonight, it's not because you cheated on a spelling test in 9th grade. So the brothers have got it wrong in a sense. But it's also more right than they know in terms of, yeah, buddy, there is cause and effect between what you did and your present situation. But you need to know that the cause and effect between where you've been and where you're headed has been rigged by God for the sake of His glory and your good. Imagine that. Imagine that. Even when you think you are in distress, the living God has so ordained things, if you are one of His people, that this thing is for His glory and your good. Such a God we serve. So, the strategy continues to play out. Reuben gets a little self-righteous. I can identify. Ooh, I am at my worst when I am right. When I'm wrong and stupid, I can remain reasonably humble. But when I'm right and know it, I can be a pickle. Reuben answered them, "Did I not tell you not to sin against this boy?" Okay, Reuben, you got your I told you so points. You got your little self-righteous brownie points that will never do you any good. But if you feel good, you got them. But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. Now, here comes grace. And they did not know. There's a world of things they didn't know, but they did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Joseph had been speaking to them through an Egyptian Hebrew interpreter, and they thought he was hearing them back through that same interpreter, not realizing he had not forgotten his birth language. So he's got kind of a built-in wiretap scenario in their little sidebar conversations that his interpreter's not interpreting. He's just hearing them. And he turned away from them and wept. I think he wept because he knew what God had in store for them. Probably some sorrow for the lost years. But you think, he wept because he was just very, very sad. About what? About what? He's about to load them up in a good way. I think there's joy more than sorrow in his weeping. And he returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them. He took the number 2. Figures Reuben probably ought to lead the caravan home, the oldest. So I'll take the second born Simeon, I'll hold him, and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders that they did not hear, to fill their bags with grain and to replace every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. Even as a human father, and if my memory serves me right, even as a human kid, I have both heard a parent say and said as a parent, this is for your own good, though you may not understand it all. If you've done any parenting, and a lot of you have, you've said similar words to a kiddo who didn't get it in the moment. Well, they have been blessed. This is for their good. They think this tricky Egyptian prime minister is trying to set them up or frame them when they discover the blessing they've been given. They're not yet ready to see it as the grace that it is. They will be, but not yet. Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. They think they went, they paid some money, they got some grain, they got to go home, get Bubba, come back and ransom Simeon, get Benjamin, ransom Simeon, call it a day. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, so they're a whole day's walk now down the road, up the road, he saw his money in the mouth of his sack. He said to his brothers, my money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack. And at this, their hearts failed them. Failed them. Not their hearts rejoiced. Failed them. They turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this? Not what is this that God has done for us? Oh no. Oh no. What is this that God has done to us? Which leads me with this sort of last observation. To know that God is, and to know what He's capable of, but not to know Him, has to be the scariest thing in the world. To know that omnipotence and omniscience and omnipresence is active all around, but to know nothing of grace, what a terrifying thing. To live your life knowing that the God who is can do anything He wants to you, but not to come to the place where you live in the realization that He's done amazing things for you. And the funny thing is, you can see the things He's done. Hey guys, we hauled a bucket load of money down here to buy a bucket load of food. And now we're heading home with the food and the money. That fact pattern suggests good things. And yet, what has God done to us? The gracious character of God. Missed in that moment, but active anyway. We continue next week. I've often said, anybody? I can't read the Bible, it's boring. And I don't know where you found the boring part. I know you can bog down in some genealogies, and some of those long sections of law can get a bit tedious because you're reading a law book. But especially if you remember, these are not fables, these are not myths, these are not morality plays. These are human beings whom God has kept their experiences intact for us to get to come back and track our way through.